Hey everybody, today gonna go back a little bit more towards the beginning, more of an introductory level topic. Wanted to cover arrays and lists, and they're just the two most basic collections basically in C Sharp and .NET, and really most languages. So this isn't necessarily specific to C Sharp as for what we're doing, but definitely C Sharp oriented. Um, so again, wanted to start just with two of the most basic collections. One of which is just your basic array. Um, and there's a whole bunch of different ways we can declare an array. I'm doing all of these with string arrays. One of the first key points is in C Sharp compared to some other languages, when you're declaring an array, you do put your little array declarator, that little double box parenthesis thing, on the type and not the name of the array. So we're going to call this one string array. There. So with some other languages, you might do it like that. Java comes to mind, I believe. It's been a little while since I played with Java, though. But doing our declaration here, we're going to do, it's a new string, and it's an array, and then we're going to do curly braces and go ahead and populate this with a couple of values. I'm just going to call it 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So that's one way to declare and also instantiate the string array that we're going to be working with. You can also do where you declare it, but we haven't actually created it yet. So we've got it essentially reserved as far as the variable goes, but we haven't actually created anything yet. We can then later come and actually create it. And this is going to be also another string array with 3 items in it, or it's going to be 3 wide. To actually, and this works with just about any collection, you can work with the array by index. So they are going to be 0 based. So there we go. The first index, or index 0, we're going to assign 0. The second index is going to be 2. And the final one is going to be 3. There's all sorts of different ways we can do this. You'll see in the first example, the string array, we created it and then we populated it like this. We can also do it where we declare the length and populate it at the same time, or on the same line. So I'm going to do that one with an integer array. Well, let's just call it numbers. There you go. So this is basically 3 different ways to create an array in C Sharp. We can also do multi-dimensional or jagged arrays. The only difference in the way that that is done is, whoops. There you go. So this is a 2-dimensional array, and we're going to call this one There you go. So now we have a 2-dimensional array that is populated by the values from string array and second array. What is it not happy about here? Nope. Can't do that. I don't know how I typed that, but okay. So there we go. Next, we're going to go over lists, which are actually, for the most part, far, far better than just a strict array. So you do it, the syntax is a little bit different. We do list, our type, our name, so string list for this one, and okay. Now there's a lot of different ways we can declare a list as well. We can do some things very similar to what we were doing with the array above. Can also convert an array into a string. So for this one, I want to do my string list is my string array to list. That's one way to populate. We can also populate them through enumeration, where if you have a list of things, you list.add, and you just loop through a collection and add them to that list. Lists have a whole lot of cool methods that arrays just don't have. We're going to actually cover that here in a little bit too, but with the list we can do things like string.remove, but that's not what we're going to cover quite yet. Another fun way I like to actually declare lists a lot, when I know I'm going to have a handful of values that I want to have formatted semi-attractively, I will do this, where you declare your list just like you normally would, and then you can essentially do this, and then here we can actually add our values that we know we're going to want. And one of the nice things here is that it's not very picky on how you actually format here. The only thing that's really important is you can do multi-line. You can do one new item for the list per line. You just have to separate it by commas, and then the final item, there is no comma, and then at the end of your curly braces you put your semicolon. So the syntax or the format is a little bit different than what you'll see in a lot of places, but I think it really does a lot to kind of keep code clean sometimes. And the last thing I'm going to do real quick here is I'm going to go ahead and put a console.read key so that when I run this code in a little bit, the console pauses and doesn't exit right away. So one thing I did want to cover as well is some of the fun stuff with lists and arrays, but also with variables. So I'm going to actually do that by essentially enumerating, and there's a few different ways to enumerate. Actually, there's an easier way than this, but this one's pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I've got this method already written, so I'm just going to paste it in here real quick. I've got this method. It's a private static void add list, and then it's int number to append. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to declare another list here. I'm going to loop from 0 to whatever number we pass into the method, and then we're going to increment until we reach that. And then we're going to add an index with I as a string until we reach that number. And then I'm going to actually also use a stopwatch to measure how long it takes for this to happen. So one thing is arrays are in system.collections.generic, so our lists. Stopwatch is in system.diagnostics. So, yep, now we have our stopwatch working. And then let's go ahead and call this real quick just to see what we're going to see. I've got it echoing out how long in ticks it is going to take. Ticks are to some extent equivalent to a millisecond, but they are a higher resolution and a little bit more accurate. So let's do 50,000 times. Let's see how long it takes to loop through 50,000 times. And I'm going to go ahead and compile and run. And it'll take just a second here. I don't know at what point my Visual Studio decided it wanted to run slower. Oops. Because it is not 4 wide. Okay, so hey, it's tiny. Okay, so it took 38,000 some odd ticks to run through that 50,000 times. Another thing I'm going to do is with an array, you don't have a .add method, so you have to come up with all sorts of clever ways to try to do the same thing. So I'm going to paste this in here, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I've done the same thing where where I'm doing a stopwatch again when I come into the method. Start it. I declare a string array with a new string, length of 1, and then I loop through it for each one, and I append 1 each time, and then I don't really recall why I wrote this part originally, but then I do an array.resize because, let's see, no add, no remove. Not a lot of choices here, really. We can reverse it. We can do the same thing with a list, though. Reverse, which is actually nice if you have something, for example, if you're reading a text file from top to bottom, like you generally do, then you can flip it on things like error logs. There's actually a video where we go over exactly that already. Okay, and once we've done that, we're going to do a stopwatch.stop, and then we're going to see how long it takes this to run. So I'm going to add that as well. And let's also do 50,000. Now, one of the advantages to working with lists, especially when you're resizing lists, is lists are incredibly quick. Arrays are not so much. So as far as human perception goes, it's not going to be a huge difference for a small collection like 50,000 simple additions. But if you're doing something much larger or much heavier in memory, you'll definitely notice a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and run it again here. See that 50,000 strings to array happen pretty much imperceptibly quick. Doing it 50,000 times in the array took, what do we got here? Let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so that we can all read it a little bit better. And then I'll have to figure out why I made this so tiny. So here we go. We've got 12 million ticks compared to 73,000. So that is much, much bigger. We could do the calculations on it, but I'm feeling a little bit lazy. One other thing, just to be fair, is that sometimes bringing new things into code and testing once shows a little bit of bias, where you might see the first time you load the stopwatch, for example, it runs much slower, and the next time it goes much quicker. Or, for example, when you instantiate your first list object. So, to be a little bit more fair, I'm going to run this a few times, but 50,000 on the length it takes that list is probably not going to be what we want to do, so I'm going to run it to 5,000. I'm going to run it, let's do 4 times. Okay, go ahead and run it. There you go. So to 5,000 times for list array. Array. Let's clean that up. Okay, here we go. So list array, list array, list array, list array. See that? Oh no, pretty close to each other, but we are still seeing a pretty big difference in the time between 5,000 items to a list versus 5,000 times to an array. So we're still seeing well over 10 times. It looks like about 30 times off the top of my head difference. So that is a big difference. The last bit of fun I wanted to do was actually hitting specific indexes of these a little bit more. So there's another video, and I'll make sure there's a link to this one as well, where we go through using the arguments from passing in objects to both WinForms and another one for console apps. So some of the fun things that we can do is, so in our, let's do okay, so we can do this and write out where it is. So we can use a list to get the actual position of something inside of that list. So for 2, we know that we've got 1 in the 0 index, 2 in the first index, 3 in the third, etc. So what we should see when we echo this out is it'll write 1. Another thing we can do is we can write out what's at a specific index. So let's write out what's in the third index. And it's already a string, so I'm not going to worry about that. Okay. So we're still not going to see a whole lot, but we are going to see 1 for right here, and then also for there we should see 0, 1, 2, 3. So we should see the number 1 as a string and the word 4. And there we go, just like that. So again, there's some more fun on working with the list specifically and also indexes if you want to look at a couple of those videos. Otherwise, next video will probably be slightly more advanced collections that are a little bit more fun as well. Thanks.